Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Tuesday, December 28th, 2021, and today we're going to be talking about Joe Biden's prospects at running against President Donald Trump in the 2024 presidential election, citing that in this interview, President Biden says he is eager to face Donald Trump in the 2024 presidential election. He says, "Why would I not run against Donald Trump as the nominee? That would increase the prospect at running." And he talks about this in this interview for ABC News, where they are asking him a bunch of routine questions, and he acknowledges that fate has intervened in his life before. I think he's primarily referencing to in 2016 when his son passed away that ultimately deterred him from running for president of the United States. That was actually 2015, but it was for the 2016 presidential election. And he says that he would run for re-election if he's in good health. I think that President Biden isn't necessarily naive when it comes to this point. He does recognize that there are concerns about his health, concerns about his age, and the ability to run for re-election in the future. So when I see things like this, I think that President Biden is very much aware of all of the political discussion surrounding his potential re-election bid, but also points out that if Donald Trump was to be the GOP nominee, that would just simply increase his prospect of running. And I see this as Biden in doing two things. One, I think number one, that was redundant. One, I think trolling President Trump to an extent that he's saying, I want you to run, goading him on, trying to get President Trump to find a way to curate a re-election bid that he might already be planning and might have already laid out the groundwork. I think that we're seeing a lot of early signs of what will be a presidential contender being Donald Trump, but there is no solid confirmation from President Trump about a 2024 presidential bid. But I think that it is very likely that he decides to run for re-election, and President Biden is just adding fuel to the fire. And we'll talk about the electability of President Trump for a re-election bid in 2024 and why he might not necessarily be the GOP's best option entering into that new presidential year. The second thing that I think President Biden is doing, I think that he is showing the Democratic Party that he is up for it in 2024. I think that he is trying to dispel rumors that it's going to be Kamala Harris or Pete Buttigieg replacing him in 2024 as the Democratic nominee for president. Because Biden, I think, knows the best, being a career politician for a very long time, knowing that incumbent presidents typically win re-election. I mean, President Trump was the first president to lose re-election since George H.W. Bush in 1992. So it had been a long time. It had been back-to-back-to-back presidencies of re-election bids that have been successful. But historically speaking, there have never been four presidents consecutively re-elected. In fact, before Obama won re-election, there had only been one time in United States history where three presidents had been consecutively re-elected. So history wasn't necessarily on the side of Obama, but it had been done before. For President Trump, it had never happened, and it still has yet to happen, and it's going to be decades until the chances come again. But looking at this statement from President Biden, I think that we are seeing a presidential bid start up and start to circulate in the media. I think that the White House would be much less confident in sending out statements like this one, saying that Biden intends to run for re-election, or Biden saying that I will run if I'm in good health. I don't think he's setting up this possibility of him withdrawing from the race right before the 2024 primaries. Rather, I think he's setting up a very real possibility that he decides to run. Because during the 2020 election, I do agree that he used some vague language when he called himself a transitional candidate, when he called himself a transitional president. It did make it sound as if he was only going to be here for one term. But at the same time, I don't think the Democratic Party would have let him make that decision back then, or much less announce it to the United States that he would not run for re-election in 2024. I think Biden would be dropping way more hints that he wouldn't be running in 2024 if that was his true intention. And I think that President Trump has been goaded along by President Biden consistently in order for President Trump to announce some type of bid in 2024, because I think the Democratic Party sees President Trump as a very easy win for the 2024 presidential election. What I see in this is that the Democratic Party already knows where Donald Trump lacked. They know where Joe Biden was able to expand upon in terms of his support, and where he was able to take advantage of the strong discontent from members of both sides in certain states. For instance, Arizona and Georgia, two states that were likely states for Romney, likely states for McCain, safe states in some extent for Bush, seeing how well the Republican Party did in Georgia and Arizona in the past, and then all of a sudden the 2016 election rolls around in a position where Hillary Clinton should not have been performing better than Obama in these states, but did considerably, remarkably better at that. And then in 2020, these two states ultimately go blue. In addition to that, President Biden was able to expand on support for Democrats amongst white voters. While President Trump was able to make narrow improvements amongst minority voters, it was heavily counteracted by that 70% of the electorate that is white voters. And that's where Biden was able to shine. And Democrats know the playbook already for President Trump. They know exactly what strategy he has used and what he is going to try to use in 2024. And now they have more ammunition against him. January 6th happened after President Trump lost the election. That happened after Democrats won the 2 Senate races in the state of Georgia. So Democrats absolutely have the energy, and they already had enough against President Trump back in the 2020 election. And he only seems to be making it more difficult for himself in 2024. You could also argue the same thing for Joe Biden, however. I think that it is a very real thing to recognize that Joe Biden is simply unpopular at this point in time. But to assume that this unpopularity spell is going to last for the entirety of his presidency is to be completely wrong about this situation. Joe Biden is a return to normalcy type president, so he's going to see fluctuations in approval as Obama did, as Bush did, as Clinton did, as Bush did, as Reagan did, as all of the presidents did. And you can even see in terms of the comparison over the first term for all of these presidents, or the only term that they have for the case of Donald Trump and George H.W. Bush and Jimmy Carter, that in comparison, there are times where Biden was doing better than some presidents and sometimes where he was doing worse. And you can see that there are positions where people who are now regarded as top-tier presidents on either political side that were even at lower points than President Biden is today. For instance, Ronald Reagan on the 765th day of his presidency was at a 35% approval. He went on just 2 years later to win every single state except for one. So keep that in mind. At one point in time before Reagan had a 49 state sweep, he had a 35% approval. And by the time the election rolled around, it bumped up to somewhere around 54 to 57%. So being in a recoverable position is entirely possible. The only president in modern history who remained unpopular the entirety of his presidency is, get this, President Donald Trump. So that's why the Democrats, I think, are a bit more confident about their 2024 prospects, and why Joe Biden is also more confident and, in his own words, more eager to run against Donald Trump in 2024 if he ends up being the nominee, because it will make it easier, and I do believe this, will make it easier for the Democratic Party to win. When you see some of these Republican names of people who have publicly expressed interest in running, you actually have Senator Ted Cruz, who pretty much says that if Trump decides to not run, that he is next in line to secure the nomination. Now, he said this to a journalist who is actually 15 years old. It's a conservative outlet. It's called the Truth Gazette. Now, this seems to be something I think Ted Cruz did not expect anyone to pick up upon. I mean, he's being interviewed by a 15-year-old, and I think he's being much more honest and much less careful about his words, because this isn't some mainstream outlet. This wasn't, at least I think in his mind, going to go immediately to ABC News, Fox News, MSNBC, even the Washington Post that are reporting on it right now. But it did, because what he said was on the record and entirely in his words. And he says that he would absolutely consider a run for president in 2024, and that he thinks it's very likely Republican voters would give him the nomination, because he's referencing Nixon or Reagan or McCain or Romney, the runner-ups in previous primaries that go on to win future primaries because they were runner-ups, and then that GOP nominee ended up losing the election. So with that, I think you would see, I think many other people have a similar type of mindset about running for president in 2024. I mean, you have a bunch of people that I think could pose a more major threat to the Democratic Party than Donald Trump would. You know, Donald Trump may be someone who was able to make major inroads in the Rust Belt, was able to solidify Iowa and Ohio for the Republican Party, but he has made some significant disadvantages for the Republican Party in reference to previous elections. I mean, just compare the 2012 election versus the 2016 election, one of which was a Democratic victory. Yet in states such as Texas, Georgia, Arizona, Virginia, you all saw Democrats actually perform worse. Yet they were able to win in 2012, but they did not win in 2016. Compare it to 2020 and you look at the 2016 versus 2020 change, you see major changes in states such as Colorado, Kansas even, Georgia, Minnesota. Donald Trump only made narrow advancements, and referencing 2012 versus 2020, you can see that in a Democratic victory versus a Democratic victory, sure, there were some major advancements. In the Rust Belt, you're looking at Wisconsin 6 points more Republican, Michigan 7 points more Republican, Pennsylvania 4 points more Republican, but some major disadvantages. Georgia is 8 points more Democratic. Texas is 10 points more Democratic. Arizona, 9. Colorado, 8. Even Utah, 28 points more Democratic. Virginia, 6 points more Democratic. So while Donald Trump may have made inroads in the Rust Belt, all of that could be simply counteracted by a victory for Democrats in Texas. It could be counteracted through a Southern strategy of a Democratic victory in Georgia, North Carolina, and Arizona. Effectively winning in this southern region makes it impossible for Donald Trump to win in the 2024 presidential election. And I think Democrats are counting on that. But for some of these other Republicans, I think that it makes it less likely that Biden decides to run if they are in the midst. Nikki Haley, I think at some point in time, will become president or vice president of the United States. She is an untapped name, and I think that she certainly holds a lot of political legitimacy and can win a lot of swing voters. The same can be said for Ron DeSantis. I even think that it could be argued for Mike Pence. These people that may be closely associated with President Trump and would undoubtedly get his base, maybe Mike Pence less so than others, but still, when you have voters that are attached to one person, and that person being Donald Trump, anyone close to him that becomes the front runner will immediately get their support. And if Donald Trump decides to throw his support behind any of these people, they will inevitably and undoubtedly become the 2024 nominee for president. So knowing this, knowing that whichever Republican gets that support could face against Joe Biden in the general election, I think that because they are more electable, arguably, I think to a further extent, I think Ron DeSantis is more electable than Trump, gets all of that Trump support, but doesn't come across as unpolitically correct, doesn't come across as extreme to the average independent voter. I think that all of that makes it less likely for Biden to run in 2024. But the fact remains, President Biden said it himself. He wants Donald Trump to run, and I think that many other Democrats do as well. I think they see this as an easy opportunity for them to win in 2024 simply because Donald Trump will still be unpopular. As much as Joe Biden is unpopular, people are still going to disapprove of Donald Trump. That's just how it works. When you look at his presidency, while Democrats may not necessarily have been favored the entire time, Donald Trump never was. Even though Democrats may have reached a low point at one point, Donald Trump wasn't able to ride that anti-democratic sentiment and bump himself up. And that's the harsh reality, I think, for Donald Trump. And, looking at the presidential polls that we have seen between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, the fact that they fluctuate back and forth, meaning Joe Biden can still be ahead by 7 points according to a YouGov poll, but down by 8 in another. The fluctuation here means there's no general consensus. If there's no general consensus for a president who is being disapproved of by 8 to 9 points nationwide, that tells you that if Joe Biden recovers, the consensus probably will lean towards his way. I mean, that's just how politics works. If someone is unpopular now and they still aren't being beaten by a margin that they should be, or a margin that was seen for the opposition candidate, in this case Donald Trump, it tells you about the electability of that person. And I think that Joe Biden is certainly electable in 2024. To treat the race like it's a done deal and the GOP is undoubtedly going to win is to treat this race in a very wrong fashion. Because no matter what, 2024 is going to be competitive. It could be competitive with Trump. It could be competitive with DeSantis. It could be competitive with any Republican or Democratic nominee. So to treat it like it's a done deal is completely wrong. But there are better chances of victory for a certain candidate if someone else decides to run and ends up winning that nomination. And I think that one person is Donald Trump. I think that if we are to look at Donald Trump's track record, look at what he has done, voters have already rejected him one time. They may have liked him in 2016, but that was before he was president of the United States. The fact that he has continued the election lies, the fact that he has continued doing a number of things involved in politics, I think that voters might end up rejecting him a second time. And I think that Democratic Party voters know this. I think that the top tickets, and I think that Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, all of them, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, they all know that if Trump decides to run for re-election in 2024, that it will be much easier to win, or not necessarily much easier, but easier to win than if he was running against a Ron DeSantis, Nikki Haley type candidate who very much has the Trump base, but also has the ability to win over independent voters in a better fashion and doesn't have an election that they already lost in their track record. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2024 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.